Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. Welcome back to those of you who are with us this morning, and welcome to those of you joining us in Harris Hall and anyone watching online. Our first item of business is a 1:30 p.m. time certain, and this is a second reading and public hearing on ordinance number PA 1393 in the matter of amending the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan and adopting the Blue River Complete Community Plan. And so, get back to my script. We will also be considering ordinance number 24-08 in the matter of amending Lane Code, Chapter 116, to implement the Blue River Complete Community Plan by adding the Community Residential Zone, Community Flex Use Zone, and Blue River Drive Overlay Zone, amending the Park and Recreation Zone, and adopting a Savings and Severability Clause. And this is file number 509 PA 23-05693. The ordinances before us are proposals to amend the Rural Comprehensive Plan, to amend Lane Code Chapter 16 that were initiated by the Land Management Division at the direction of the Board of County Commissioners. The order of proceedings for this hearing will be: first, we'll hear a report by staff, followed by any public testimony, and then additional comments by staff. And I do have 3 people signed up. Tanya, is there anyone signed up to speak online? Just thinking about how much time to allow when we get to that portion.
I do not see anyone registered online for that.
Okay, great, thank you. All commissioners are required to disclose any potential or actual conflicts of interest that they may have with the proposal before us. A public official is met with an actual conflict of interest when that public official participates in action that would affect the financial interest of the official's relative, or a business with which the official or a relative of the official is associated. A public official is met with a potential conflict of interest when the public official participates in an action that could affect the financial interest of the official, a relative of that official, or a business with which the official or the relative of that official is associated. That means if a commissioner or one of their relatives could be financially impacted, either positively or negatively, by the proposal, that should be disclosed for the record, followed by a statement that the commissioner can or cannot proceed. If there is an actual conflict, that must be disclosed on the record, and then the conflicted commissioner must recuse themselves and step out of the room until the public hearing has concluded. So now I'll ask each commissioner to disclose if they have any conflicts. I'll start with Commissioner Senega.
None.
Commissioner Buck.
None.
Commissioner Farr.
None.
And Vice Chair Lovell.
None.
And now I'll ask if there are any challenges to commissioners' ability to participate in the public hearing. If there is anyone present who wishes to challenge a commissioner over a conflict of interest, that challenger should explain the basis for the challenges. And the commissioner challenged will have an opportunity to respond and state whether they're able to proceed without any actual conflict of interest. Is there any member of the public wishing to challenge any commissioner's ability to participate in this public hearing? Seeing no one in Harris Hall. Tanya, is anyone online raising a hand?
You would like to challenge the Board of County Commissioners on this item to give, what was the terminology? Please raise your virtual hand. I do not see any virtual hands raised, Chair.
Thank you, Tanya. Then at this time, I will turn it over to the staff for a staff report.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Lindsay Eichner from the Planning Department. With me is Taylor Carsley. And today, let me share my presentation here. So today, I'll try to be as brief as I can, but this has been a long project and there's a lot of background that I would like to present to you. So we'll go over the project overview, what we've done for public outreach. I'll do a brief overview of the community plan, a brief overview of the draft Lane Code zoning amendments, and then we'll be available for questions after that.
We don't have your screen up here.
Oh.
There should be a laminated card there with instructions if you present.
It's just, what am I presenting? Where am I? Need to present it here. Yeah. My apologies.
Here we go. Good.
Hiding. There we go. Now we're in presentation mode. Okay. This is a slide that's sharing our project management team. It was not only Lane County staff, but we were working with some transportation and growth management program staff, and we had hired consultants from LCOG and Urban Collaborative. And today with us, we have Chloe from LCOG as well for when we have any questions. On the board, or on the screen, is the paragraph of the project intent. I'm not going to read that for you today. It is also in the plan. The area that we're talking about today is the unincorporated community of Blue River. It was designated as a rural unincorporated community as part of our comprehensive plan adoption in 1984. In September of 2020, the Holiday Farm Fire swept through the McKenzie River Valley, and it caused great devastation to the community of Blue River. This devastation brought on new and exceptional challenges for the community. As part of the rebuilding effort, it was determined that a community plan and amendments to the zoning code could significantly help property owners in the community in rebuilding. We applied for and received, with board direction and support, a transportation and growth management grant to help fund consultants to help us on this project of creating a complete community plan. In addition to the extensive public participation that I'll go over in a moment, the project is also bound by the objectives of our funding source, which is the transportation and growth management. And there are 11 objectives that are listed in our plan itself. And it was necessary to make sure that while we were creating the plan, that we were keeping it consistent with the growth, transportation and growth management objectives. A couple of them include create a zoning and design concept for downtown core, recognizing the importance of downtown Blue River as a commercial center, expand housing options, avoid discretionary permit reviews, and increase residential development efficiencies while recognizing water, sewer, and stormwater limitations to enable more people to live near businesses, services, and the school. And the last one that I'll read out loud is to create land development and roadway standards for walkability and bikeability throughout the community, including on rural roads. An example is Blue River Loop Road, and in mixed-use centers. This is an example of one of the postcards we mailed out to all the community members and residents within the community of Blue River to try to encourage participation on this project. And so this is a picture up here of one of our community meetings that we held in Blue River at the school. And over the course of developing this project, we held 10 stakeholder interviews. We had a project advisory committee that consisted of local residents as well as state representatives and regional representatives from different agencies. At our first community meeting, we had 40 people sign in on our sign-in sheet. And at our second community meeting, we had about 22 people sign in on our sign-up sheet. So I always clarify that it's on our sign-up sheet because not everyone always is able to sign in. We also on top of our in-person community meetings, we held an online virtual workshop at the same time for both of those meetings that lasted for 2 weeks. And the first online virtual workshop, we had 21 responses to the questions that we had posed online. And then the second virtual workshop, we received 8 responses. We held 2 public hearings at the Planning Commission, and we had a total of 13 comments at those meetings. They were very well attended. And we've received 12 written, either emailed or mailed in comments. And we, as staff and as our project advisor or our project management team, have tried to take in all of the comments we've been hearing and be as nimble and flexible, and we're trying to constantly make tweaks so that we get this code right for the community, that we hear what the community has. So all of this public input has been so helpful in determining this final result that we have today. So we took, based on initial comments that we heard in interviews, our team developed 3 draft alternatives that we provided, or we presented on at the first community meeting in November of 2023. And then we also took those 3 options to our Planning Commission and got some feedback and direction from the Planning Commission in December of 2023. And what the results of all of the feedback ended up being not choosing one of the specific options, but it was a combination of multiple of the options, which then we transferred into our draft plan. We took the draft plan back to the community again, and then we have before you today what is the adoption package. These are the 4 goals that we have that are in the complete community plan. Goal 1 is the livable and resilient community. Goal 2, identifiable and inviting downtown. Goal 3, transportation accessibility. Goal 4, recreational destination. These are the goals, and then each of these goals is supported by individual objectives. I'm not going to read through each of those objectives, but they are in the plan, and I'm happy to go over any of them at the conclusion of our report. This is the plan map. This map shows the outline of the community. It shows community flex use zoning. It shows community residential zone. The Blue River Drive overlay zone is in the downtown corridor to the right where there's a number 2. It shows a multimodal trail and a multi-use bike and pedestrian way, which is number 5 is one of those trails that takes you from downtown out to the park. And another one of the trails takes you from downtown. It's number 4 and kind of along the highway up so that there's connection between downtown and the school property. And these are conceptual trails at this point. I will note that the expansion of the community boundary on the right-hand side, which is to bring in the parkland, which is green on the map, we're expanding it because there is a specific state law that allows us to bring in parkland that has existed since prior to the adoption of our comprehensive plan. So we weren't allowed, there wasn't a specific exception to allow us to bring in other forest lands, but there is specific for parkland. There is also a parallel project that I believe you are aware of that is looking at installing community drain fields. The 2 properties that it's a potential that they could be installed on, are where the number 7s are on the map. So the pink property in the middle with the number 7 is referred to as the Three Sisters Meadow. And then over to the right-hand side in the green, where the number 7 is the Blue River Park. As I mentioned, that the previous map showed 3 new zones, and we're proposing to add them to Lane Code Chapter 16 as part of this process. The community residential zone replaces many of the property that would replace the rural residential zoning on many of the properties. There's a community flex use zone, which is a combination of residential and commercial uses. And then there's a Blue River Drive overlay zone that applies to approximately 12 properties in downtown Blue River that are adjacent to Blue River Drive to help support goal 2 of the plan and creating an identifiable and inviting downtown. As part of the motion that the Planning Commission made to forward a positive recommendation to the board, they requested staff make a number of edits to the zoning code language for the community flex use and the Blue River Drive overlay zone. And so as I go through each of the zones, I'll point out the changes that we've made based off of that direction. So the community residential zone, we have a table here that shows some general development standards. It shows what the community residential zone we have proposed in the zone. We have a quick comparison for existing rural residential and a comparison for the community flex use zone. So most of the siting standards, the development standards are staying the same as what is in existing rural residential. To highlight, we are allowing, or we're proposing to allow 2 residential units to be allowed per property as an outright allowed use, and with an additional allowance for an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU. These are, of course, reliant or dependent on if there's adequate water and sewer availability or septic system availability, but those would be allowed uses on the property. And we're hoping that this will lead to more housing options in the Blue River area. The next is a community flex use zone. This is a very unique zone. We don't have anything else like this in Lane County, rural Lane County right now. So it is, like I mentioned, a combination between residential and commercial zoning. Where residential use is an outright permitted use, commercial uses under the rural commercial zone right now, any new commercial use triggers a type 2 land use application, especially if it is a new building on the property. We're looking at having it, the majority of new commercial uses come in under a type 1 application with just a handful of clear and objective compatibility standards to make sure that they're compatible with adjoining residential uses and adjoining commercial uses. And then we also are looking at allowing light industrial uses as a type 2 use to ensure that they are compatible with adjoining residential and commercial uses. We're looking at reducing setbacks down to 5 feet. And then potentially 0 feet if it's a duplex or a structure that crosses a property line. We're looking at smaller lot sizes. So we're looking at an 8,000 square foot minimum lot size with an exception down to 5,000 square feet if they are connected eventually to a community wastewater system. And then we're removing all requirements for having on-site parking for new commercial uses, which on the smaller lots, especially in downtown Blue River, have really caused a lot of hindrances to redeveloping. And then there are in the original draft that we took to the Planning Commission, we had carried over the sign standards from the rural commercial zone, and there is a building height, and it does of 40 feet. And then anything over that would require a fire district's sign off to have a structure larger than that. And that kind of gets into making sure that they can protect that if it catches fire. And then some of the amendments that we have made is that originally in our commercial use compatibility standards, we had referenced building code to try to keep them fairly clear and objective. But after discussion and staff and the Planning Commission agreed with the testimony that was given that we shouldn't tie those specifically together. So we came up with some different clear and objective standards for commercial for the commercial uses, and tried to remove references to building code as much as we could, or actually we removed them. We added a pathway for a commercial use that doesn't necessarily meet the commercial standards to have it be elevated to a type 2 special use permit. In the original code, there wasn't an easy pathway forward that if for some reason the development standards weren't met, to have a backup option. So we added that into the code so if you don't meet the type 1 standards, you can still have an option under the type 2 criteria. And then the current language in Lane Code and the drafted code presented to the Planning Commission lacked a clear definition of what light industrial use was. So we have included a definition of what light industrial is in the ordinance. And then there was a concern raised during the Planning Commission public hearing that the term screening was not used consistently throughout the code. The direction was to clarify when referring to screening that it meant the use or the items were visually screened from the street and neighboring properties. So we made sure that the same language was used throughout all of the codes. So it didn't say screening in one spot and screening so that you can't see it from the road in another spot. We just made sure that was consistent for any reference to the word screening. In the draft that was provided to the Planning Commission under the use standards for similar uses too. So if there's a use that's not explicitly listed in the use table, we have an extra option of uses similar to allowed uses. There was some words that needed to get tweaked there because it said that you couldn't apply for that use similar to if you were within the Blue River Drive overlay. So we said, no, that should apply to all the properties. So we tweaked that language to allow that to apply in the area where the Blue River Drive overlay applied. In response to public comment, both staff and Planning Commission supported allowing light industrial use in the community flex use zone to have a building size of up to 40,000 square feet. This standard is consistent with state law provisions for industrial uses within rural unincorporated community and provides additional flexibility for future developments on larger lots. Other development and siting standards are still applicable, like setbacks, proof of adequate water and septic availability. And as the code is proposed right now, it would require a type 2 use for light industrial up to 40,000 square feet. And then last was the sign language. The current language about signage in the rural commercial zone was carried over to the flex use zoning. The standard states that signs must not project above the height of the tallest building. And so a question was raised, what if I don't have a building on my property, but I still need a sign? I have a use, but there's not a official building, say a food cart or something, how tall can I have a sign? So we amended the language to say you can have a ground-mounted sign up to 15 feet in height, or you can have a sign that's affixed to your building. So if your building's a one-story building, you'd be it needs to stay the same height as your one-story building if it's affixed, or if you have a two-story building, you can have it affixed to the exterior of your second story, but that if it's a ground-mounted sign, it would be a maximum of 15 feet to be consistent whether or not you have a building. Next, we have the Blue River Drive overlay zone. And so for these properties that are right along Blue River Drive in downtown, we have allowed up to a 0-foot setback with a maximum of a 15-foot setback from Blue River Drive. We required siting standards is that there's a pedestrian walkway to the entrance of the building. That the main entrance to the building needs to be on Blue River Drive. There's no accessory structures in the front of the building, meaning between Blue River Drive and the facade of the building. We have some recommended design standards of elevating a residential entrance. It kind of visually breaks up if people know it's a commercial use or residential use. Again, it's recommended but not required. We also have added in an allowance that if in the design of a new building in this zone that somebody's not able to meet the requirements, they are able to elevate it to a type 2 review and ask for an exception to one of those standards. So we're, again, trying to have type 1 uses and review, but also offering a type 2 option if those standards aren't able to be made. And the other amendment that we made to this zone since we went to the Planning Commission was the reference to screening that I had mentioned earlier. And to kind of continue on with the idea of this downtown area on Blue River Drive adjacent to the overlay is this is the design concept that the board has previously approved for development of a new road and parking spaces within the right-of-way. And so I did want to point out that there is a proposal of adding 41 on-street parking spaces within the right-of-way along this 3-block portion of Blue River Drive. We've received some feedback about having entrances off of Blue River Drive onto the private property or where a commercial use would be having, a need for parking in the front or not. And what we found out after reviewing our current code and talking with transportation planning staff is that Chapter 15 of our lane code regulates right-of-way and where driveways can be taken, and it currently refers to if you have a a property that fronts 2 different roads, it requires you to take access off of the lower classification road, which in this case would be the side street. So on this map, it would just be off, say, Echo Street or Dexter Street and not off of Blue River Drive. So we had kind of talked about that at our planning commission and meetings, so I wanted to raise that with you as well. And then this is just another image from the design concept that is hopeful to be developed in downtown. The other updates as part of this project, besides just the 3 new zones, we are proposing to amend the Park and Recreation Zone to allow a community drain field as an outright permitted use if that project moves forward, and so that it was not a specifically listed use in the code right now, so we're proposing to add that in. We're also making a significant amount of rural comprehensive plan amendments. We're adopting the plan itself as part of this proposal. We're expanding the community boundary. We're amending policies within the rural comprehensive plan, and we're amending the plan and the zone maps. The approval criteria for the project are listed on the screen. One of the things that we, besides our local criteria for amending the comprehensive plan and amending our zoning code, is that we make findings to the statewide planning goals and policies, and specifically the unincorporated communities rule. So to make sure that all the zoning code is consistent with those regulations, and the specific findings about expanding the boundary that were consistent with those. We believe we are. This is the existing and the proposed maps. So for zoning, so you can see the different shades of yellow are different rural residential zonings based on minimum lot size is the difference between the colors. Red is rural industrial. And then on the proposed map, the pink is the flex use zoning, the yellow is the community residential, and you can see the expansion of the park to the east with where the green is, that we're bringing that into that community boundary. We are not rezoning that property. I will clarify that. It's coming into the community, but it's remaining the same zone. And which is Park and Recreation. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Lindsay. So at this time, I will ask if there are any questions from commissioners for staff before we move into public testimony. There'll be a chance again later. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. The last map you showed really gives us a stark example of the great amount of work that went into this process. And look at the color changes on that. And I guess I just want to say I'm looking forward to visiting this new Blue River. I think it's pretty exciting what we're going to see as people move forward with the internal designs. The question that I had was regarding the park area. You stated that there's a state rule, a state law that allows for a park to be brought into the comprehensive plan, as long as it was zoned, or as long as it was in use as a park before. Whatever the zoning, or does it have to be zoned as a park before?
So how the rule reads is it needs to remain as resource land. So even though it's zoned for park and recreation, it's considered resource land, so similar to forest land. So it will remain in that same zoning.
So the color on the map stays the same?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's very good work. One thing I'd like to say, Chair, is that when you make a presentation, Ms. Eichner, you put it in terms that really are quite understandable to me. You use common terms as opposed to sometimes planning terms that go a little bit over a lot of folks' head. So really well done in making this presentation. And the PowerPoint presentation, for those of people who are watching online, this PowerPoint presentation, the slides are available online and give a clear illustration of the process. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners that are just clarifying questions? We'll have another chance. Okay. Seeing none, I will move us into public testimony. At this time, I just have 3 folks signed up here in Harris Hall. I will double check with Tanya after these 3 have spoken and then turn it back to the room to see if anyone came in late wishing to speak. But we do have a 2:30 work session as a board. If we need to fudge that a little, we will. But being mindful of that, let's do 3 minutes. Thank you, Tanya. And first up will be Zach Galloway, and Zach will be followed by Melanie Stanley. So please welcome to the podium, state your name and mailing address for the record, and once you do, your time will begin. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Zach Galloway. I'm a senior planner with TBG Architects and Planners. We're located at 375 West 4th. We just moved offices. I am here on behalf of folks working on the Three Sisters Meadow site, which you heard Lindsay refer to. We essentially had parallel and concurrent projects, and so we felt like it was important to share our project and give some background on what we were doing, collaborating and working with county staff. So to the greatest ability, it looked like these are one project in some regards, and that we could not exhaust people with public meetings and too much public outreach, and make sure that we were sharing information back and forth and collaborating. So it's been a very it's been a good project in that way, just being able to collaborate and share information. We are providing public testimony. We are seeking some additional changes to the ordinance that's in front of you. We've provided that public testimony via email. And so I just want to go into a little bit of background about the community involvement process that we undertook in the beginning part of this year. We worked really closely with a lot of community members, several of whom are here tonight. As I said, we had our own public meeting at McKenzie School. We had a site tour of the Three Sisters Meadow site and an online survey. So essentially, people were able to share information about the site, Three Sisters Meadow. And the main question that we asked them were, what are the land uses, the types of development you want to see at this site? Included within the testimony that I provided is a summary of that community involvement. The top 3 items that folks identified were open space and recreation. Not surprisingly, people like the way it is currently. Lots of trails and open area there to walk around. Additional housing in Blue River. And number 3 was light industrial. And so the remainder of my comments are really going to be about that light industrial land use that we would like to see revisited and tweaked a bit. In addition to those land uses, we also heard folks identify 2 big themes, and I think they're consistent with what you just heard from Lindsay as well. Flexibility in all things, right? We want to make sure that we're able to meet new opportunities as the community tries to redevelop. We also want to make sure that we simplify the process. So we want to make sure that there's as many type 1 applications out there as possible so that folks can move through the application review process as quickly as possible as they're rebuilding and redeveloping. And so with that in mind, you heard the light industrial land use essentially has a one-size-fits-all. So from the smallest project up to that 40,000 square foot size, you're forced to go through the type 2 application process, and we're requesting that that be broken into a 2-tiered system so that if you're smaller, less than 16,000 square feet, that you go through a type 1, that you have objective standards that allow the reviewing staff member to check the boxes and make sure you're hitting those objective standards. And yes, by all means, if you go larger than 16,000, if you're starting to approach 40,000 square feet, then it's more appropriate to go into that type 2 conditional use permit to ensure that you're addressing compatibility concerns with your neighbors. So with that, we're also, and this is in our testimony, proposing that setbacks be increased and that additional screening be required for those smaller scale, so less than 16,000 square foot light industrial uses. So just introducing more objective standards that hopefully allow people to move through the application review process quickly. So we're requesting those changes. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about our process or these additional changes.
Thank you. Thank you for your public comment. Shall we reserve questions? Does staff want to respond to public comment? We hear all the testimony and then have staff respond, and then we'll see if commissioners still have questions. Okay, thank you. Next up is Melanie Stanley, who will be followed by Chris Levon. I'm sorry if I'm saying your last name. You can correct it for the record when you get to the mic. Thank you.
Hello, Melanie Stanley. My mailing address is P.O. Box 195, Blue River, Oregon. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to thank staff for all their work in trying to get Blue River in a place to be able to be successful in recovery and rebuilding. I know it has been no small task. I want to acknowledge the efforts made in creating recommendations for certain pieces versus making them requirements, which will help provide some of that much needed flexibility we've been trying to gain with this process. I would like to ask that there is attention paid to the on-site parking requirement. That's been something I've been talking about since the Planning Commission. They know that. That there will be the ability to have a type 1 deviation of this if needed to allow for added parking. Historically, the lots that front Main Street have been commercial frontage with residential in the rear. This has meant that most of the septic infrastructure is located in the middle of most of these lots. So with that in mind, the idea of on-site parking requirements away from the front of the Blue River Drive area may end up being a barrier to building. The many Blue River Drive overlays discussed have mostly settled on parallel parking along Blue River Drive. But in order to provide adequate parking, which, by the way, if every lot of the 11 that are probably buildable, because one is currently residential, if every lot had the 9 spaces that are being allowed in front of mine, that would be 99 parking spots in front. Right now, that's 42 if we go with parallel. So that's half the parking. Parking access, diagonal head-in parking would actually need to be the option, not just parallel. Also, there's still no funding that's been identified for any of the Blue River design concept that would provide any of this parking or any of this new design for the streets. So without that, where are people going to park, or where are we going to designate this parking that may or may not be able to exist on the rear of these lots? So I'm asking that without a commitment of funds, as well as a commitment to accommodate these requests for head-in parking, et cetera, we have to do something. So there has to be something looked at for this. So that's my thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Melanie. Next up is Chris Levon.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Lavoie, or Lavoie. Blue River fire victim. Both my home and my business were taken out. And I want to really thank Lindsay and Taylor for the work they've been doing and all their team. They've done a lot, more than I ever expected could and would be done after something like this. We've been in the area, bought the property up there in 2006. And a lot of land use issues have been making it really problematic as a property owner, business owner, to meet guidelines and to be successful and just sustainable as a business. And that's been a problem the entire time. And as an unincorporated community, the community members in Blue River put together Blue River Community Development Corporation. After the fire, I lost my job. They recruited me to be the executive director of that, and it's called the McKinsey Community Partnership right now. And we've been fighting to try and get energy to help bring the county in, to help do some stuff to help the rural town. Because of the land use laws have basically strangled it and kind of killed it off. So what you're doing here is tremendously important. Blue River was the heartbeat of the Upper McKenzie Valley area for economically, and it can be again if we make some changes and allow people to actually invest and build. So this is just super important. A lot of us as property owners couldn't rebuild with current code. It just didn't make any sense. It didn't make financial sense. So without these changes, we're kind of screwed. So it's super important that we get that. And Melanie made up a good point, and I don't want that to hold you back from saying yes on this project, but we need to find some money for rural towns. And I know it's hard to find because we're always pushing budgets here. I've heard before from many commissioners, current and in past. But hopefully we can find some ways to goose the process along a little bit. And I just want to, again, thank you guys for everything that you guys have been doing.
Thank you for your public comment. Tanya, let's try one more time to make sure nobody's logged on late to give testimony online.
Thank you, Chair. I do not see anyone logged on to give testimony.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Harris Hall who wishes to speak? Great. Welcome. Please come to the podium, and we do have one more person in Harris Hall. Tanya, so if you would state your name and address for the record, and then your time will begin.
Ruby Seitz, 51466 Blue River Drive. So I'm a resident directly adjacent to the Three Sisters Meadow. And that's my primary interest. I've been talking with the local neighbors too, and when I see the, I appreciate all the time, and it's fascinating to watch this process unfold and how complicated it is. And I'm not a planning professional, but I find it very interesting to learn. When I read the 40,000 square foot, high limit for the building, I kind of had to cringe because I'm trying to understand what that means, and I found out that's part of the statewide code. But I would like to maybe just record that I'm very concerned. What are we thinking we would have out there? Like, are we talking a large store or a warehouse with forklift operations, or what that is? So I just feel like I really appreciate, the open space, the calm that park provides adjacent to the track. And there's a lot of ideas in the community about what could be done there, and everything takes time. And there's no proposals on the table right now immediately, but I feel like involving the local community in what happens out there, and the school and all the neighbors, immediate neighbors too, is very important to myself and my closest neighbors, because we live right there. So, I'm not sure what the vision will be in the future, but I just want to, make the statement now that we would like to stay involved, and we don't want, quick planning windows where we can't then provide any input. And I agree that everybody's going to have different ideas of what they see out there, but the 40,000 square foot, nobody that I have talked to can understand what that would mean. So we just want to, clarify. And I don't exactly understand the difference between type 1, type 2 process. So hearing the first commenter about, having a quicker proposal up to 16,000 square feet, I don't really know myself. Maybe that's a question I would have. What does that mean for the community, or does it just happen and that's it? It's really about the nature of what goes there, and it's a very unique place. It's a large flat area, could be used a heck of a lot for the future in the community. And so we'd like to kind of keep it that way and not have it go to like one business. And I don't think that would happen, but I just want to make it really clear that that's not what we envision. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. That concludes who has signed up to give public comment. So I will return it to staff for response or additional comments based on testimony we've heard. And then commissioners will have a chance to ask more questions or get additional information.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies, we weren't able to get the written comments from Mr. Galloway distributed prior to the meeting, but we will get those to Tanya so she can get those distributed out and posted online. And so that would be an option to consider if you want to have a type 1, which I'll clarify. A type 1 is we have standards in our office, we review them, they do not get noticed to the neighbors, and there's not a local appeal process. by the applicant or the neighbors typically. So that's considered a type 1 process. A type 2 process, we do send pre-decision, we send out an opportunity for comment and referrals to neighboring properties, and then a decision is issued and mailed out, and then there is an opportunity for a local appeal process. So that's kind of the difference between a type 1 and type 2 when I'm referring to the different standards and criteria. And when we were kind of going back to when we were discussing the 40,000 square feet for light industrial uses at the Planning Commission, we had originally, in the draft we took to the Planning Commission, had all uses have a maximum of 4,000 square feet, which is the maximum of commercial square footage in state law that's allowed, to try to just be consistent, regardless if it's commercial or light industrial. Through discussions at the Planning Commission, we kind of determined that, well, we don't know what future innovation is going to hold. We don't know, the industries change faster than we can change our code. So we tried to mimic state law directly and go straight to the 40,000 square feet rather than try to come up with a number that was in the middle that everyone could agree on. We tried to just stick with the maximum allowed square footage. And then require it to go through a type 2 review so we could have a more discretionary review of, is this going to impact the neighbors? What is this light industrial use? Does it qualify as a light industrial use? And does it make sense for where it's at? Things like that. I could go over the exact criteria if you'd like, but that's kind of the idea of why we would elevate the light industrial to a type 2. But again, part of that was on building size. There was such a variety of, it could be a 5,000 square foot building, it could be a 40,000 square foot building. For the Three Sisters Meadow, it's currently zoned rural industrial, and that would be allowed right now. If somebody came in under the current zoning, they could apply for a conditional use permit and build a building potentially up to 40,000 square feet. So we're just trying to continue that option be allowed in that zone that we're now rezoning it to. You have any?
No, I think you covered that well.
And I will make note, I hear what Melanie is saying about the parking spaces along Blue River Drive. But I just wanted to make a note that we are not reviewing the road design standard as part of this project. That was already previously reviewed and decision made by the board on the future road design of Blue River Drive in the downtown area.
Yeah, and we just also want to make clear that there is no on-site parking requirement for new development or for redevelopment. Someone could opt to do that, but there is no requirement to do so. So we wouldn't be reviewing that as part of a redevelopment application or new development application.
Okay,
Concludes us.
then I will turn it over to commissioners for questions of staff or need for any additional information. And then we have some options before us. We have an ordinance before us also, so just to start priming the pump for commissioners, we could close the public hearing and consider the ordinance before us. We could close the public hearing and ask for amendments and have a different ordinance brought back at another date. We could leave the hearing open and move to another date with this ordinance or requested amendments. Those are basically the four options before us. So I'll turn it over to the board for questions. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Good presentation, very understandable, very easy to follow. Regarding the on-site parking requirements, there's a 15-foot maximum setback, is that correct? Which kind of eliminates any on-site parking that's not mid-lot, as was proposed. You know, it wouldn't be in front of the building, it would be behind the building, which the comment was that that's typically used or has been historically used for septage. Is that anticipated for the future? Okay, so it does basically does eliminate on-site parking based on, you can't really park on a septic field. So, yeah, okay, that's clear. Then the other question, Mr. Galloway suggested maybe 16,000 square feet as being as a cutoff for type 1 versus type 2. Was there any discussion with that regarding that specifically at the Planning Commission level, or was it all along any size up to 40,000 square feet for type 2 based on light industrial?
There was not, that specific proposal was not discussed, but there was, for the project that they were working on a very high-level conceptual plan of what could potentially go on the property. So nothing set in stone, nothing actually planned, but just a very high level. One of the ideas was that if you had a couple small business incubator type 4,000 to 5,000 square foot units, you could have maybe 3 of them, just something on the smaller scale that could be 16,000 square feet.
And for a community the size with the footprint of Blue River, even the kind of expanded footprint that's proposed here, 40,000 square feet is a pretty big building. I mean, that's like the size of a Safeway store, to put it in perspective. Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Buck? Or Vice Chair, I didn't see, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I didn't get Mr. Galloway's letter, so I'm not, and I made a note that of his request for the breakdown of the size of the square footage, but I unfortunately didn't write down the other items that he was requesting. Do you have those?
Yeah, I do. If you'd allow me to pull it up. I believe the highlights were a 2-tiered approach between a type 1 and a type 2 permit, with the cutoff being 16,000 square feet in area. Objective standards for the type 1 review of that, if the board elected to direct staff to create type 1 clear and objective standards. And those might involve setbacks and or screening. And I believe that was the majority of it.
Okay. Thank you. I can clearly understand why he's proposing this, just for redevelopment purposes. What I'm hearing, though, from Ms. Sykes is that not only have the residents there gone through a lot, and there's a lot of trauma still out there, and, you know, they kind of want to know what's going on. And the type 1, there's no notification if they meet certain requirements. In a type 2, there is some kind of notification. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to object, but there's some kind of notification of what's happening. And that, in my mind, is a good thing. Up there, we just have to be extra careful about making sure that people are involved in the decisions that are being made. So I want to be very sensitive to that fact. It doesn't mean that everything, even as it is currently proposed, is going to require a notice of any kind. But if you're going to put something in that's pretty large in an area that doesn't have anything of that size, that should really require some public notice to the community so that they can give their input. Not to the extent to give developers pause by any means, But it's just extra time, which I know costs money for a developer, but in this particular case, upriver, I am leaning towards the way that it's currently written. But the objective standards and the screening setbacks, if they're more clear in his proposal, I really have no objection to that. I guess I'd need a side to side of like, what are they written now and what is he proposing, so that if we need to make things more clear, this is the opportune time to do that. And then if the parking thing is taken care of and there's no required on-site parking, because we all know Melanie needs to get her store back up and running, and that's not a hindrance, then I'm supportive of the way that it's written. I was hoping that, we may be able to pass this today and keep people moving forward, but if we need to pause and have another meeting for an adjustment or two, we should do that before we move forward.
And staff has identified December 10th as the time that we could come back if we need a third reading and continued hearing. So it's a little ways out, but not too far. It gives staff time to put together any amendments that we might request. Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In light of what Commissioner Book just said, is there a way that we could approve this so it goes down the road, but yet have staff directed to come back with some clear and objective standards to clarify the last two items? I mean, would that be a path forward?
Yeah, that would be a motion that makes sense.
I mean, I think you're going to need to give direction. I was asking before the hearing today whether the proposal was something that was clearly that you could put into a motion, but given what I'm hearing, that I don't think you can do that. So I think you're just going to need to direct staff to come back with something.
Back with a third reading? That's what you're
Yeah.
thinking? And adopt it then? Okay.
It's an amended ordinance. Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions then. We're talking hypothetically about a 40,000 square foot building, but in all reality, that's not going to go in there unless we figure out the septic problem. My question then to figure that out is if we're going to be able to use the park land for a drainage field, what's the capacity of that? Do you have any idea? I mean, we're talking about something situated between a creek, right, to the north a little bit, and the highway to the south. So, and that's what, a 7-acre parcel, if I'm not mistaken? Is that what I remember in last?
It's fairly small for sure, and our understanding is that the water table is fairly high there as well. So I don't know what the feasibility currently is of developing on that property a septic drainage field, but these questions are valid, certainly.
So even though I got all excited about maybe finding a solution to that, that's probably not what we're looking at right now, is what I'm hearing. So, I have a few more questions. So I think, hey, the way you've worked out the right-of-way and the parking and all that is a brilliant use for maximum economic value. I appreciate all that. My question is this, as all the ones I've got written down, I'm going to lump it all into one thing. This all sounds like a really great plan for us to be creative and nimble about making unincorporated Lane County more investable. Why don't we do this countywide? Why can't we take this and adopt this as far as every city in all the unincorporated areas and give everybody a shot in the arm for economic prosperity coming up? Why can't we do this as one fell swoop?
That would be great.
Well, let's make it great, shall we?
Well, so the way that and can speak to this as well, but my understanding is we have to look at it community by community, or in handfuls of communities by themselves, or maybe Amber wants to speak as well.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lindsay's correct. So there is a special carve-out in the unincorporated communities rule and state law that allows us to do what we're doing for Blue River, allow additional density, additional houses, and look at new uses for commercial industrial uses. There are requirements that we have to find that there's adequate soil and water capacity as well as transportation capacity. So that does require a look at each individual community to a large degree. And we've identified the need for this work because it really does present opportunities in other communities of the county. The challenge with taking that work on, is doing that preliminary assessment and then finding the capacity, staff capacity and resources for that project. So we've identified the project. It's on our list to look at other communities and do something like we've done for Blue River, what we're proposing here today. And Blue River, this proposal does present a model that we can springboard from. But it's just identifying that, doing that initial analysis of which communities could accommodate additional density and potentially different uses, and then identifying resources.
Is there a top 5 hit list that, I mean, obviously, we're dealing with this particular issue with the current staff levels that we have. Is there a goal that we could set ourselves? Could we do one of these a year in another community? I mean, is that a reasonable goal? I'm just trying to find out, in order for us to get somewhere, we need to take a step forward.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and we'd be happy to look into that and report back.
I'd love that. I got a few more questions here, if you don't mind. I know we're running short on time. The other thing that I was thinking about, all of our commercial issues that you have going on there, what are our fire requirements? All these buildings need to be sprinkled? Where's that water coming from?
So there's a community water system that's getting rebuilt, I believe. But so we would have to, all of these new uses will have to meet building code requirements, but there's not a requirement built into the code to have residential sprinklers. We're not proposing any fire hardening standards.
Other than the
part of this.
standard ones, if you have a commercial building with a residence on top, you've got to have a 2-inch resilient ceiling and those kinds of things, right? That we could handle without putting all the costly fire sprinkler systems in them. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, they would be required to comply with building code, but no additional planning, fire hardening requirements.
Awesome. Couple more questions. On your residential allowance for 2 units and 1 ADU permitted for each unit of land at 80,000 square feet, brilliant. Love that idea. We should apply that countywide. Would be the easiest fix, I think, in the county. I'm curious on the 3 large lots that are across the road from Mackenzie Track up McBride Road, those big parcels up there, are those going to be able to easily be divided into those 80,000 square foot lots coming forward? Are we giving them a path forward to where that's not going to be an additional headache?
So those are going to be proposed to be rezoned to the community residential. So they'll have a 1 acre minimum lot size for up to 3 of those residential units. They would go through the standard partition or subdivision process if they wish as property owners. There are slopes up there, so those may come into play if they do go through a land division. But they would go through the normal partition or subdivision process.
Okay. And the last question is the maximum amount of expansion that we can expect in Blue River is the inclusion of the park. Is that a fair statement? There's no other place we're going to be able to expand this community. So doing what we're doing here is the best use, the highest use of this area that we have to work with. Fabulous. Thank you.
So, yeah, Commissioner Bell.
I'm sorry, I forgot to just give a huge shout out and thank you to everybody who's participated. Like, this transportation growth management plan is a big, big deal. And it's taken at least a year, if not much more than that. And, you know, we're getting like a finished product here for us to look at, but the immense amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes has been pretty incredible. I mean, we've had a good amount of people showing up in Blue River to give feedback, but our staff has done an incredible job of presenting all this work in a nutshell. But it has been buckets load of work behind the scenes. So I just want to give you a huge thank you and your whole team that's been working on it.
So thank you, commissioners, and I'll echo Commissioner Buck's appreciation to staff and to the folks in the community. And it feels like we're getting really close, but it doesn't sound like we're exactly there today to approve the ordinance before us. So if I'm hearing that there's some interest in exploring some of the proposed amendments or some variations on them, and that staff has a little more information about the specificity, that the requested amendments were sent to staff. The commissioners haven't seen them. And so it sounds like, if I'm reading the dais here, it might be a good idea to move, to approve the second reading, but set a third reading and continued public hearing and direct some revisions of the ordinance. I don't know how much specificity around those revisions you need in the motion.
I think we would rely on some board discussion or, board direction at least. There's kind of two tiers to that recommendation. I realize you haven't seen the letter yet, but there was the 16,000 bifurcation or tiered approach that would separate a type 1 procedure from a type 2 procedure. And then there was, the actual clear and objective standards that would be involved if the board opted to allow for a type 1 procedure under 16,000 square feet. So
first, am I getting the right sense of the room that we want to move to a third reading and ask for some amendments? Then we can talk about what those amendments might actually entail. Commissioner Farr and then Commissioner Buck.
I'm prepared to move on the ordinance today, but I think what you just suggested, looking at the clear and objective, clear standards, and 16,000 is still a fairly good-sized building to not have more public input on, should it be necessary. So if we were to come back with a bifurcation in the type 1 versus type 2, I don't know that it has to be 16,000, but you could come back with an option board so we could come up with the very specific ordinance language on the 10th. So.
Commissioner Buck?
Question, the clear and objective standards of the screening and the setbacks was specifically if we were to bifurcate the square footage for type 1 and type 2, is that right? And if we weren't to do that, do we need those clear and objective standards stated?
That's a good question, Commissioner. Yes, so if the commissioners decided to bifurcate the light industrial use specifically, and there was a type 1 procedure developed, then we would need clear and objective standards to implement that permitting process. Currently, light industrial uses require a type 2 process, and we already have discretionary approval criteria set for
So
that
if we
process.
weren't going to go that route and bifurcate, we wouldn't need to do that second part,
That's
is that
correct.
right? It would be as is.
Correct.
So as I mentioned earlier, I completely understand where the request is coming from, but I do believe that the people there would want notification, and that's the type 2 process of something going in there. I am personally now okay with passing it the way that it is, just to ensure that the proper notification goes to people. I'm not necessarily opposed to a change, but I just really want to be sensitive of the neighbors and the public who might want to be notified about what in an industrial fashion is going in that location.
Would you like to make a motion, and then if it's a second, we can see if there's any discussion to that? other
Sure.
than being ready
Yeah,
for-
it would be moving the ordinance the way that it's currently written. So I would approve the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number PA 1319 in the matter of amending the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, adopting the Blue River Complete Community Plan as a special purpose plan of the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, and adopting a savings and severability clause, and ordinance number 24-08 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 16 to implement the Blue River Complete Community Plan by adding the Community Residential Zone, Community Flex Zone, and Blue River Drive Overlay Zone, amending the Park and Recreation Zone, and adopting a savings and severability clause for file number 509-PA23-05693.
Clarify, that's 1393
Right.
PA? Yeah.
Yeah, you just misspoke on the PA number, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by the Vice Chair to approve the second reading, public hearing, and ordinance and adopt ordinance 2408 as presented. Is there discussion to that motion? Commissioner
Also brief,
Farr.
Chair, we're pressed for time, but, you know, I'm encouraged by Planning Director Bell talking about this potentially being a guideline for future communities, and that you're open to looking at other similar rural communities in Lane County. Excited about that. Also this, Chair, that, you know, we're trying to solve a housing problem in Lane County. We're not going to do it in Blue River. We're not going to solve the housing problem in Blue River. So as much local control as we have in that wonderful little community, that gem of a niche in the Mackenzie River, I'm all in favor of that.
Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really excited to pass this, and you know what amazing work everybody's put into it and the community. I have a lot of concerns about the parking. I mean, losing half of the parking, if that is as stated, I mean that's a big deal. It's interesting with that septic system. You know, what do we do? So I mean, I will vote to approve it, but I am hesitant with the issues of parking.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what a great job you've done. And my point about getting that done for other communities is you've done all the hard work now. I mean, all the groundwork's been done. Now you have a pattern and a way of looking at things. And I think keeping momentum forward and having a goal is a super great idea. So I'm in support of this to move it forward so we can establish the gold standard going forward.
Well, I'll just say, some of us, I know for myself, I've been up and walked and talked with some folks up there, but I rely very heavily on the commissioner who represents the district. I know Commissioner Buck's been paying close attention and really appreciate her sort of laying out and bringing us to this point, and understanding the difference between the amendments that were requested and what's before us, and appreciate all the work that's gone into putting this amendment before us. As for this being a template, rather than us trying to sort of hijack this process to do something countywide. It's sort of like we say at the Association of Oregon Counties. We say if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. So I feel like here, if you've seen one, one community within Lane County, you've seen one community. But I think we are potentially creating a great template, and have gotten a lot of the way there. If this can find a path forward that we can apply elsewhere. So thank you for all of your comments, colleagues. And so we do have a motion and a second on the table to approve the second reading and public hearing on ordinance number PA 1393 and ordinance number 24-08 as presented. And because it is an ordinance, we do need a roll call vote. Do we need a separate vote on this, on the second reading? Just the one on the ordinance? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I'll look to the administrator to call the roll for the vote, please.
Commissioner Seneca.
Yay.
Commissioner Lovell.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Yes.
And Commissioner Trieger.
Yes. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of the second reading and public hearing on ordinance number PA 1393 in the matter of amending the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, adopting the Blue River Complete Community Plan as a special purpose plan of the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, and adopting a savings and severability clause, and approval of ordinance number 24-08 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 16 to implement the Blue River Complete Community Plan by adding the Community Residential Zone, Community Flex Use Zone, and Blue River Drive Overlay Zone, amending the Park and Recreation Zone, and adopting a savings and severability clause on file number 509-PA23-05693. And thank you to staff and congratulations to the community for moving yet one more step closer to recovery. Thank you all so much for your time today. With that, briefly, we do have, if there's any commissioners' business, any announcements from commissioners this afternoon. Commissioner Buck.
Since we're on the subject of Blue River, the O'Brien Library is having their grand opening ceremony and ribbon cutting on the 16th from 2 to 4. So everybody is welcome.
Thank you. Any other announcements? No. Any future assignment requests? Seeing none, no assignments to review. Any other business before we conclude this portion of the meeting? No. Then for the public, at the sound of my gavel, we will be recessed. We will take, let's reconvene promptly at 3 in the Board of County Commissioners Conference Room. We are doing a board training with a facilitator. Anyone who wishes to listen in to the part that is available for that needs to go online to our agenda, to the Commissioners webpage and register for a Zoom link. And when we conclude our session up in the Board of County Commissioners Conference Room, we will be adjourned until next Tuesday, November 5th. So with that, we are in recess, and I'll see you all up in the conference room in a few minutes.